Good afternoon. Welcome once again to Around Solway. This week I'd like you to join me on a visit to Whithorn, which lies just a little inland from both Luce Bay and Wigtown Bay at the southern end of the Machas Peninsula. To be honest, Whithorn has generally been somewhere I have passed through on my way to or from the Isle of Whithorn, a popular corner for holidays and sailing. But it was to Whithorn itself I went to talk to some of the people there, and, as I so often find when making these programmes, I learnt an amazing amount about the little town, whose principal claim to fame is as the cradle of Christianity in Scotland. That basic fact I did know, the details I did not, so I went to see George Simpson, originally a native of Kirkyards, who has lived in or near Whithorn for very many years, and who has made quite a study of the history of the place. I asked him to tell me about the Christian links with Whithorn.
It goes back to St. Ninian, who was born on the shores of the Solway about 360 AD. His father was a local chieftain in this district, and St. Ninian was educated at Rome. He was consecrated a bishop by Pope Syracuse, and he was sent back to Galloway to preach the gospel to his fellow countrymen. He built the first stone church in Scotland. Its stone walls were a striking contrast to the mud-built houses in the district, hence the name Candida Casa, which is the White House. In Anglo-Saxon this became Whithorn, H-W-I-T-E-R-N, now Whithorn. St. Ninian founded his monastery at Whithorn, and in time it became renowned at home and abroad.
Tell me about St. Ninian himself. Is much known about him as a man, what he was like?
Very little is known of St. Ninian, because a great fire destroyed Candida Casa in the 11th century, and all the records were destroyed at that time. The only recorded writings we have of St. Ninian were written 300 years later by St. Bede, and that is the reason why there's so little known. He was only gathering up fragments.
So what about the museum here in Whithorn? What does that contain?
Well, the museum here in Whithorn really contains very little. There are quite a lot of stones from St. Ninian's cave, but the main finds have all been removed to Edinburgh.
So did St. Ninian then travel round Scotland spreading the word? What happened?
Yes, he spread the word in this locality, and then he moved up into Ayrshire and through the Midlands of Scotland and across the borders.
The church here was one of the first churches in Scotland?
It was absolutely the first church in Scotland. Candida Casa was the first Christian church in Scotland. And the cave at St. Ninian's down in Fisgal Glen, that was his retreat. He went there to study and to have peace and quietness.
And people still go to the cave, don't they?
Oh, very much so. The Roman Catholics have a very big pilgrimage. Each year, about 2,000 people go down the glen. The Manpower Services Commission repaired the glen quite recently, and the walk is now reasonable. But there's 200 or 300 yards across the shore, and yet the old people, they always go. And
the cave itself was damaged by a landslide, George?
Very much so, 2 years ago last month. And the last two pilgrimages they've had to erect a sort of temporary mast place at the foot of the cave, but they're hoping for next year to be in again.
So how did the town then develop? What were the main things that made it grow as a settlement?
Oh, well, it was really based on agriculture.
What about the tourists? Do they come to Whithorn much?
Yes, we've quite a good tourist trade.
What do you like about living in Whithorn, George?
Well, I've got very attached to Whithorn. I wouldn't like to live anywhere else. I've been around the world, and I was glad to be back to Galloway. It's a quiet country place. I enjoy gardening and fishing, and Whithorn suits me all right.
George Simpson telling me some of the town's early history. He added that there was once a university in Whithorn, although it is probable that it was in fact a monastic school. Certainly the townspeople never knew when some great person in church or state might come riding into the borough to worship at the shrine, making Whithorn in the 6th and 7th centuries very much a centre of Christianity in Scotland. In 1581, pious pilgrimages, which had been forbidden at the time of the Reformation, were made penal by Act of Parliament, and in the words of the Reverend C.H. Dick in his book Highways and Byways in Galloway and Carrick, published in 1916, the royal borough of Whithorn went to sleep in the year 1581 and has scarcely stirred since that time. It is sad that so many of Whithorn's attributes and assets have gone now, such as the creamery, the railway, an important link with the outside world and so much missed throughout Galloway. The secondary school, which although it was only a 3-year school, did keep the youngsters in their hometown and with their social life centred there, which is of course no longer the case. There were once 2 saddlers in Whithorn, and it's also true to say that there are a number of shops up for sale at present. In many ways a sad picture, but as with everything else, it has its positive side. Many people who were native to Whithorn and went away to work have come back to end their days in its quiet serenity and have found the way of life most pleasant. I called to see Jim Birchman, who lives in the house he was born in on the main street, and before talking to him about his fascinating hobby, I asked him if he had lived in the borough all his life.
No, well, after I got demobbed, I went out to East Africa, to Kenya actually, as superintendent buildings with the Kenya government. And I was there for 17 years. It was a great life, you know. And then we come home in 1964. I got a job as clerk of works with the Whithorn County Council, building reinforced concrete tanks and water pipes right through the county. And that was most interesting.
Quite an undertaking, too,
it was, actually. The only thing was, in the winter time, that first winter after 17 years, I thought I was going to die with a cold, you know.
You seem to have survived.
Oh yes, very much so.
I think when you retired, you took up a very interesting hobby.
Yes, I started recording the old tombstones in the Kirkyards. Oh, some about 7 or 8 of them round the Whithorn district. And that was most rewarding.
Why did you start doing that, Jim?
Well, I had to walk around the old kirkyard in Whithorn, and a lot of the stones, I reckoned in 50 or 60 years' time, you wouldn't be able to read them, so I thought I must do something to make a record of all these.
Do you cross-reference these, Jim, do you?
Yes, I've got them all alphabetically now, and it's most useful because I get so many visitors from overseas, from Canada, Australia and America, and they come in asking about their ancestors. Well, all I have to do is check up the name of the ancestor, look at the number of stones that relate to them and turn it up. And it's quite amazing the information that these people can get from my records.
What sort of information have you collated then?
All the deaths, actually. People lost at sea, people dying in foreign countries, farm people and everything else. And especially the trades are mentioned in it, where you'll get a farmer in such and such a farm, you'll get a stonemason, you'll get a joiner, and all the rest of the business. That is, of course, mostly 18th century stones. They're the most interesting. And a little point to remember, in an old, and when I say an old kirkyard, I mean only an old kirkyard, all the lettering always faces the east. So you don't need a compass if you go into an old kirkyard. You just look at where the lettering is, and it always faces the east. Now, the reason for that was that the deceased could then look to the rising sun. That remembers in the 18th century. Now, on the west side, you get carved emblems such as the skull and crossbones, hourglasses, winged souls, and all that sort of carving. In Scotland, you do get the maiden name of the deceased wife. The maiden name is always put on the stone, not her married name, which in England is only the married name. And that helps quite a lot in tracing ancestors.
You must have been able to build up some tremendous pictures of families through the ages.
Oh yes, there's quite a lot. And of course, the thing to remember when you're recording these is that nearly everybody in each village or small town are all related, so you've got to be very careful what you say.
Are there any particular interesting characters that spring to your mind?
There was an occasion when there was a Canadian family come in when I was in Whithorn Kirkyard, and there was a slab lying flat on the ground, dated 1756. Now, the Canadians said what a shame it was to have this stone lying on the ground. It should be the same as the rest of them. But as I said to them, the last person to be buried was probably very unpopular or feared, and the stone was so placed over the grave to keep he or she from getting up out of the ground. I could hear them laughing all the way to their car.
I'm not surprised. Jim, all this material that you've collected together should be published, should it not?
Some of these days when I get a bit of time, I'll get a small booklet out about it. Incidentally, Aberdeen Libraries, I've got a complete copy. Scottish Genealogical, I've got a complete copy. And I also give a copy to each minister of the parish, along with a plan of the Kirkyard. And they've been using it quite a lot. So it's very nice that people appreciate all the work I have done, actually.
It is certainly worthy of appreciation, and I've already spent ages poring over the copy of the survey that Jim lent to me. I can find out which men took unto themselves 2 or 3 wives, some epitaphs inscribed on the tombstones expressing the worth of the deceased, infant mortality, people who lived for 90 years and over, and a whole wealth of other information which builds up into a comprehensive history of the people who lived in the local parishes. I shall be paying a further visit to Jim one of these days. Archie Taylor is the Registrar for Whithorn, and has been so for the past 21 years. During that time he's seen many changes, including a large increase in divorces, practically unknown when he was first appointed, and now a common occurrence. Archie has to record the divorces of the couples he has married. He's also remarked on the increase in the number of registry office weddings, and said that last year, for the first time ever, there were more civil marriages than church ones in Whithorn. He performs these marriages in the spacious front room of his house, where I called in to talk to him about another interest in his life, Whithorn's Drama Club, and I asked him to tell me something about its history.
It goes back really to about 1926 or 27, when the Drama Club was then under the auspices of the church. I think they called it the Drama Circle. And a minister at that time used to run it on, and his wife used to produce quite a bit. And they used to hold their shows down in King's Road in Whithorn. It used to be an old church, I believe, down there. It was a carpet factory for a while, too. But it really started as a Whithorn Drama Club in 1946. A man by the name of Trevor Johns used to teach at a school here. Actually, he lived in this house, too, for a wee while. He was very keen on drama, and he was a producer, you see. I remember going down in 1946 to join the Drama Club. I thought, oh, this will be great, the Drama Club. Went down with my wife, and I was interviewed in these days, yes. But I said, I'm afraid your accent won't do at all for Scots comedies. You just have to be secretary. So I've been secretary ever since. I did get one part. After about 4 years, I got a part in a one-act play, and it was one line to say. And I thought about this, and I went on the stage and said it all wrong. So I didn't go on the stage again for another 10 years.
What sort of membership does the club have?
About maybe 25 senior members. There's 5 or 6 males, and the rest is made up of females. And then we've got also a junior section. That's children from about 7 up to about 15.
Are they keen?
Very keen. A few years ago we did a play called The Solway Romp, and I wrote another play to follow that called The Fate at Solway or something. And we had from 14 years old up to about 17 years old. I had about 20 of them in this. We put it on in the town hall. It was quite a success, quite a good success, that.
Where do you get your material from, mostly?
Well, we just send it, we read plays, and we mostly do Scottish plays, Scottish comedy and Scottish farce, because the people seem to enjoy that more. We've done things like Blythe Spirit and Lord Arthur Saville's Crime, and these sort of more classic plays like Arsenic and Old Lace, which took 11 men and 3 women. We got 11 men and 3 women out of a population of 996 people over town. Last year, or a year before, we were doing a play, and something happened and we couldn't do it, so we just threw on a Scots comedy at the last minute. It was called Kye Among the Corn. And the 3 nights we were packed out and had to bring extra seats and everything into the hall.
Where do you perform normally?
In the town hall, the new town hall down in St. John Street. And we've got our own club room, which is just opposite the town hall. It used to be the old billiard room, and we managed to get it and turn it into a nice clubhouse. So we've got a stage that we built there, the exact dimensions of the stage in the town hall, so it's very, very handy.
So you rehearse there, do you?
We do all our rehearsals there and have our meetings and all that sort of thing there. When there's nothing on, we meet once a month and have a sort of fun night, reading plays or doing all sorts of things. It's quite good fun.
Have you ever taken part in the one-act play festivals?
Yes, we used to, years ago, very, very much. We used to send 3 and 4 plays up to Newton Stewart in these days. There used to be maybe 9 plays on altogether, maybe 3 from us, 3 from Creetown, maybe 1 from Challoch, 1 from Newton Stewart, a couple of others, and it used to be 3 nights with 3 plays each night, and you could hardly get a ticket. We went to Newton Stewart about 2 years ago to see 3 festival plays that had won the festival, away in Stranraer or Girvan, and they brought them to Newton Stewart. So I got some of the drama people together. There were 18 of us went up there, and we went into the school where they have it, and when we walked in, altogether in the hall there were 24 people sitting, and 18 of them were from Whithorn.
Why do you think interest generally has fallen away like that?
Well, probably the television. We seem to be going quite strong, and so does Stranraer.
Do you have any difficulty in getting members here?
It's very difficult to get males, you know, men 18, 19 and 20 and 25, to get them to come to the drama. They seem to think it's sort of sissy. Not too bad with getting the lassies.
So come on, you fellas, it's not that bad. And certainly they all sound as if they have a lot of fun. That was Archie Taylor there. Until comparatively recently, this region had a poor record for its provision of care or occupational facilities for its handicapped citizens. And in many cases, efforts by voluntary organisations have made provision of some kind or acted as a catalyst to the authorities concerned. Whithorn is a long way from the centre of things, and there was nothing at all for its handicapped adults to do, until the local branch of the Scottish Society for the Mentally Handicapped encouraged the setting up of a Sunshine Club there. I talked to Carolyn Galloway, one of the voluntary helpers at the club, and I asked her why they had done it.
Well, the Sunshine Club was set up to help parents and guardians of handicapped adults in the area. There is nothing at all in the area to cope with them after school age, and we just decided to set up a voluntary group to fill this need.
And are we talking about physically and mentally handicapped people?
Well, most of ours are mentally handicapped, but it's any handicapped person at all.
And what sort of things can they do when they come to the club?
Well, normally when they come in, we have a cup of coffee, and they're so pleased to see us that they're really beaming when they come in. And we usually have a cup of coffee with them and a wee discussion and chat about everything that's been going on. And then we'd do various things with them and go outings and picnics and things.
Do you do sort of any projects? I mean, do you make things, or what do you do?
Well, we make collages and pictures, and they're very keen on baking and cooking, and they quite enjoy doing things with their hands and painting, anything quite messy they like, and they love music. They're very, very fond of music.
So what do you do in the musical line?
Well, we've got quite a lot of musical instruments, and they love singing, and we've got a wee band that they set up, and they thoroughly enjoy it.
How often do they come, Carolyn?
At the moment, we meet once a week in the community centre on a Tuesday from 10 o'clock till 2, and we provide a school lunch for them.
This is as much as you can get the use of the premises, is it?
With all our other commitments, this is all the time that we seem to be able to give to them at the moment.
How many volunteers are there involved?
There are about 12 of us that give up our time just to help.
And how many handicapped people have you coming?
Normally we have 10 every week, sometimes 11.
So you're working on a one-to-one basis?
More or less, yes.
Right.
We really need to have a one-to-one basis.
And was the Sunshine Club set up to fill a particular need?
It was more the SSMH Wigton branch that started it. They felt that there was a need down in this area. There was nothing at all. And we've got members from Port William, the Isle of Whithorn, and Garliston, as well as Whithorn. There was nothing in our area at all for them.
How do they get here?
We're quite lucky because we've got plenty helpers from these areas that come in, and they bring them, and we pay for their petrol.
Does this present some difficulties, say if you have wheelchairs?
It does. We will only have one wheelchair, but it's a bind, we feel sometimes, on the parents of this girl. They must bring her every time.
And there's no way around that?
There's no way around that at the moment.
What do you think will happen when the Adult Training Centre in Newton Stewart is completed?
Well, I don't know what really will happen. We just sometimes wonder this. We've never really been given much information on it. We wonder if all ours will go up to Newton Stewart or not.
And presumably your voluntary help will still be required.
Well, I would like to think so.
Have you enjoyed working with the handicapped people?
Very, very much. It's very rewarding.
What had you done before that to prepare you for it, or that made you want to become involved in it?
I really don't know. I helped at the play groups when my family were small, and then I was asked if I'd like to help at this, and I thought about it and I thought I would. But you get an awful lot out of it.
Mm.
And when you meet them in the street or anywhere, they're so pleased to see you.
What ages are they, Carolyn?
The youngest, I think, will be 17 or 18, right on up to 52, I think it is.
Do you do any sort of educational work, reading or counting or handicrafts, anything like that?
We don't make handicrafts because they're not really able to do that, but we like to give them. They're very keen on calculators. We've bought big calculators and they like doing their sums, as they call them. And they're very keen on that because they can manage to work the numbers.
Mm.
And they have 5 or 10 minutes individually with one of the helpers to, I think they're doing their lessons and they're quite happy. Just try and keep their numbers up and writing their names and trying small things with them.
Yes, it's tremendous. Is everybody else as enthusiastic as you, sir?
Oh yes, everybody is.
Carolyn Galloway, who most certainly gives as much as she very obviously receives from the group. The Sunshine Club, together with the Riding for the Disabled group in Whithorn, actually make it one of the better provided areas with regard to the facilities for handicapped people, and must surely reflect on the caring character of the local people. Whithorn has an active community centre where, as Carolyn mentioned, the Sunshine Club meets. So do the Friendship Club, the Playgroup, and groups concerned with photography, computers and amateur boxing. Whithorn also boasts a Willow Club for keep fit and exercises, a bowling green and carpet bowling, tennis on a new all-weather court which can also be used for five-a-side football, and badminton. So there are quite a wide range of physical activities to choose from for those so inclined. A hard-working community council tries to keep both the regional and district councils informed of what is going on in the borough and of particular things that might require attention. They are responsible too for the annual Civic Week, which after being at a low ebb came back with a bang this year to the delight of all concerned, providing fun and interest for locals and tourists alike. George Simpson, who we heard earlier, works very hard to make it a success. Quite a number of people have come to retire in Whithorn, charmed by its peace and quiet and the beautiful scenery that surrounds it. All of them contribute their own little bit to the life and character of the community, and undoubtedly some of them become a very important part of it. This must surely be true of Dr. Tom Baird, who, among other things, is a linguist and an expert in the English language. I had heard that he'd originally come to this part of the world in a most extraordinary way, and I asked him if this was true.
Well, looking back, I suppose I did, but at the time it didn't seem particularly odd. We were on holiday because we needed a bit of a break from our missionary work in Central Africa at the time, and we'd only got 10 days to spare, so we thought, where do we go? We knew we wanted to go to Scotland, and then we thought, well, where in Scotland? I was born in Edinburgh, but we'd been there and so on. And then we remembered 39 Steps by John Buchan, and how the hero, how he dressed up as a milkman, and he dashed off to Euston Station, I think it was, dressed as a milkman, rushed up to the booking office and said the first name that came into his head. Actually, he looked at it on a map the night before. He wanted a big area to escape in Scotland, and he had come across Newton Stewart. Well, why not, we said to ourselves. Good enough for him, how about for us? So we looked up the AA book and to see if there was a hotel. There was only 10 days. We wanted a little treat, and sure enough there was, and we had a lovely time. And towards the end of it, we went into an auctioneer, you'd call it in England, or an estate agent, and wondered whether one day we might retire nearby. And a very shrewd businessman took us to see a house in Whithorn, which is here, of course. And it was a glorious house with a magnificent view. Although we were going back to Africa in about 6 or 7 weeks from that time, we bought it for our retirement, which was due 11 years later. Retiral, by the way, in Scotland, but retirement in England, so you can take which you like. Mm-hmm. And we were very glad we did. Although we had to leave it and go back and get someone else to look after it while we were in Africa, we eventually came back to Whithorn. Although we're in a different house now, a smaller one, we're still in the main street.
It was the view, really, that sold you, was it?
It really did. The lady who took us over, who had the keys, she said to her husband when she'd locked up after us, They're going to take it, she said. They're falling in love with the view.
And are you still in love with it?
Oh, yes, we've got a photograph of it on the stairs of our present house.
What have you found about living in Whithorn? What do you like here?
Well, there are several things, obviously, including the Gulf Stream, the fact that it's mildly like Africa here and there with the odd tropical palm, not far away. But I think the two main things are near the sea and with a great sky nearby and beautiful sunsets. That's important to us because in Africa, our part of Africa, there were vast domes of sky and beautiful sunrises and sunsets. And the other things linked with it in a way, it was because it was a small community. And again in Africa particularly, but also earlier in life, we'd always loved the country, but in Africa we lived in the country and worked in the country and grown to work among small communities of folk rather than big towns, although we did serve in the big city more than once while we were out there. But we were always drawn to the wonders of a small community where you get to know people, where people don't pass you without a word, and where you feel gradually part of the place.
So open spaces really had something to do with it as well, I expect, did they?
Very much so. The Merrick and places like that. We walked up part of the Merrick in our second visit here, I think. Yes.
And you've made yourself very much part of the community here, I'm sure. Are there any particular characteristics about Whithorn that attract you?
I think it's the unexpected popping up all over the place out of ordinary people. I think it's partly that. They have a very sharp wit. For example, as you know, I'm a retired Methodist minister, and okay, I go into the grocer's, I won't say any names or advertise, but I'm looking at the apples, and I kneel down to get the blessed things, and Archie will say, "Put one up for me, Tom." And fair enough. And that would happen within the first few years of coming here. And now they're all saying, "Put one up for me," because it's such fun. And the level of wisecracking is a kind of MacEric Morecambe or MacErnest Wise all over the place in Whithorn. A very shrewd wit.
The English language is a passion of mine too, so I'll definitely be back in Whithorn to talk to Dr. Tom Baird, the gentleman with a smile in his voice. I hadn't realised before I started this programme that the earliest mention of Whithorn comes down to us linked with Rome, and that the Praetorium Roman camp at Risbane, a mile to the south, is the only one known to have existed in Wigtonshire, and that it indicated the importance of the Roman settlement. I didn't know that the route to Whithorn from the moorlands north of Glenluce and along the eastern side of Luce Bay was traditionally known as the Pilgrim's Way, or that kings and queens came here on pilgrimages. In fact, once again, I seem only to have touched the tip of the iceberg and must look deeper into the history surrounding the royal borough. Once again, we have run out of time, and I've only turned back a corner for you.